All right. All right. We're gonna get into another video. We're getting into it. I always forget this. We're getting into another video, and let me tell you, for reporting on this political stuff has made so many people mad. If you have not, go and visit my shorts on YouTube. Again, it's in the court of public opinion. You'll see it taped down at the bottom. Actually, I'm gonna change it to let you know like it. You have to type it in the court of public opinion 59.99 to actually get to the channel. Excuse me. You actually have to type that in. So I'll change that and I'll put guys can actually find the channel. But man, people have been pissed. I mean, pissed. And I'm just giving my opinion just like everybody else. And it's call me entitled about different things, but they were also entitled to give their opinion on. So it's been crazy. But at the end of the day, like hate comments, they don't bother me. And anybody that knows me, like for real, knows that stuff doesn't bother me. It doesn't even get under my skin. I'm pretty quick witted, and so therefore, I just say something witty right back to them. And yeah, you want to troll me, I'll troll you back. I don't really care. Thank you so much for the engagement. I appreciate it. But we're going to be getting into Project 2025. And this one, as you know, it's called Taking the Reins of the Government. So we're going to get into that. So let me share my screen. And then once I'm sharing my screen, then I'll be able to get into that. We're going to read over it as we normally do. Like I said, we're going to try to get through all 992 pages. Or nine, is it 900? Is it 992? Anyways, it's over 900 pages. That's all you really need to know. It's over 900 pages. So we're going to get through it, a little bit at a time, try to take down, everything that's adjustable. How about that? Anything that's digestible. But not try to overwhelm you at the same time. So let me get my screen together and then we're going to start reading from there. Go ahead before we get started. If you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more political news and as well as current events that are happening around the country. And yeah, we're gonna start with that. So this one is called "Taking the Reins of the Government." It says America's bicentennial, which culminated on July 4th, 1976, was a spirited and unifying celebration of our country, its founding, and its ideals. As we approach our nation's 250th anniversary, keep that in mind because we're going to do another video on why the 250th anniversary is so important, which will take place during the next presidency. America is now divided between two opposing forces: woke revolutionaries and those who believe in the ideals of the American Revolution. The former believe that America is and always has been systematically racist, and that is not worth celebrating. It must be fundamentally transformed, largely through a centralized administrative state. The latter believe in America's history and heroes, its principles and promise, and in every American and the American way of life. They believe in the Constitution and Republican government. Conservatives, the Americanists in this, must fight for the soul of America, which is very much at stake. Now, just 2 years after the death of the last surviving Constitutional Convention delegate, James Madison, Abraham Lincoln warned that the greatest threat to America would come not from without, but from within. This is evident today, whether it be masks and vaccine mandates, school and business closures, efforts to keep Americans from driving gas stoves, or efforts to defund the police, indoctrinate school children, alter beloved books, abridge free speech, undermine the colorblind, or deny the biological reality that there are only two sexes. The left's steady stream of insanity appears to be never ending. The next administration must stand up for American ideals, American families, and American culture, all things in which, thankfully, most Americans still believe. Highlighting this need, former director of the Offices of Management and Budget, Russ Vaught, writes in Chapter 2, The modern conservative president's task is to limit control, to limit, control, and direct the executive branch on behalf of the American people. At the core of this goal is the work of the White House and the central personnel agencies. Now, Article 2 of the Constitution vests all federal executive power in a president, made accountable for the citizenry through regular our founders wrote, the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States of America. Accordingly, Vaught writes, it is the President's agenda that should matter to the departments and agencies, not own. Yet the federal bureaucracy has a mind of its own. Federal employees are often ideologically aligned, not with the majority of the American people, but with one another, posing a profound problem for the Republican government, a government of, by, and for the people. As Donald Devine, Dennis Kirk, and Paul Dance write in Chapter 3, an autonomous bureaucracy has neither independent constitutional status nor separate moral legitimacy. Byzantine personnel rules provide the bureaucrats with their chief means of self protection. What's more, knowledge of such rules is such to thwart the president's appointees and agenda. As Divine, Kirk, and Dan's write, managing the immense bureaucracy of the federal government is impossible without an understanding of the key central personnel agencies and their governing laws and regulations. Many of these laws and regulations governing a large, underworked, overcompensated, and unaccountable federal civilian workforce are so irrational that they would be comical in less an important context. This is true whether it comes to evaluating employees' performance or hiring new employees. Only in the federal government could applicant in the hiring process be sent to the front of the line because of a history of drug addiction or alcoholism, or due to morbid obesity, irritable bowel syndrome, or a psychiatric disorder. The next administration should insist that the federal government's hiring, evaluation, retention, and compensation practices benefit taxpayers rather than benefiting the lowest rung of the federal workforce. In order to carry out the president's desires, political appointees must be given the tools, knowledge, and support to overcome the federal government's obstructionist human resources departments. More fundamentally, the new administration must fill its ranks with political appointees. Devine, Kirk, and Dance observed that the Trump administration appointed fewer political appointees in its first few months in office than any other recent presidency. This left career employees in charge of many places. This can occur even after departments have been fully staffed with political appointees. Vaught writes that with the White House Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, should establish a reputation as the keeper of commander's intent. Yet OMB is dominated by career employees who often try to overrule political appointees serving in the various executive departments. Empowering political appointees across the administration is crucial to the president's success. Above all, the president and those who serve under him or her, that's cute, must be committed to the Constitution and rule of law. This is particularly true of the conservative administration, which knows that the president is there to uphold the Constitution, not the other way around. If the conservative administration does not respect the Constitution, no administration will. In Chapter 1, former Deputy Chief of the Staff of the President, Rick Dearborn, writes that the White House counsel must take seriously the duty to protect the powers and privileges of the president from encroachment by Congress, the judiciary, and the administrative components of encroachment by, of department and agencies. End quote. Equally important, the president must enforce the Constitution and laws as written, rather than proclaiming new quote unquote law unilaterally. Presidents should not issue a mask or vaccine mandates, arbitrarily transfer student loan debts, or issue monarchical mandates of any sort. Legislature makes the laws in the republic, not executive. It is crucial that all three branches of the federal government respect what Madison calls the double security to our liberties, the separation of powers among the three branches, and the separation of powers between the federal government and states. This double security has been greatly compromised over the years. Vaught writes that modern executive branch writes federal policy, enforces that policy, and often advocates whether that policy was properly drafted, enforced. Quote, he describes it as quote unquote constitutionally dire and quote unquote in urgent need of repair, adding nothing less than the survival of in America's at stake. When it comes to ensuring that freedom can flourish, nothing is more important than deconstructing and centralizing administrative state. Political appointees who are answerable to the president and have decision making authority in the executive branch are key to this essential task. The next administration must not cede such authority to nonpartisan quote unquote experts who pursue their own ends while engaging in groupthink, insulting from American vote I'm sorry, insulating from American voters. The following chapters details how the next administration can be responsive in the American, not to entrench elites, how it can take care that all laws are uh, ex- faithfully executed, not merely those that the president desires to see executed, and how it can achieve results and not be stymied by the unelected bureaucracy. Okay, so that's going to be that. Now, there was something else I wanted to show you before I got into the commentary of all things. Now, anyone that understands that these principles are um, really based upon, okay, so because of that, I want to go through Reaganomics and I want to show you how similar Project 2025 is to Reaganomics. And so we're going to go into Reaganomics and we're going to discuss the successes, the failures, and also the effects. Now, here's a little short video here. I got this video from study.com. So it's going to actually break it down to us. And then we're going to get into that after it's done, okay? So let me get this. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, it's buffering. Oh, why would they do that? So it do what I actually expected to do. So you guess I tell you what. So we're gonna go out here because They want us to sign up. We don't want to sign up. We just want to understand what Reaganomics, the effects of Reaganomics. Okay. Let's see if we can get into this one. Let's see here. It's buffering a little bit, but just give me a second. It'll come up. I'm sure it will. But what I'm trying to say is that this mandate that they're trying to pass is it's really based off of Reaganomics. Remixing a couple of little things because they, of course, they want things to be more of like today's type situation, um or to, to relate more of today. But at the same time, a lot of it is so much that I don't think people really naturally understand how it has how it affected us even today, because it did go in effect. As you know, Ronald Reagan was actually a president, and so he put some of these things in place, and it did affect everybody. And where it looked and sound good from the very beginning, it didn't end up in that way. And this is part of the reason why we're in the situation that we're in right now. So right here you see is where what are the success and failures of Reaganomics. It says Reaganomics continued this simplification and reduction of tax structure and the creation of Reaganomics with the Tax Reform Act of 1986, resulting in a mixture of growth and wage increases, but also had negatives such as government debt. The government actually doubled during that time, and increased income inequality. So if you were of a certain ethnicity, you did benefit from Reaganomics. And if you are of certain ethnicities or certain other groups, like I was telling you the other day about fitting in these separate boxes, you are not going to benefit from this Project 2025 mandate. And that's just what it is. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is the truth. And so before you go down and cast your vote, you need to understand, one, who you're voting for, why you're voting for it. Don't just allow this to be a popularity contest. This is the government that we're talking about. These are the things that are going to govern your life here in America. And plan to stay here, then guess what? You're going to feel the effects of it. So if you go down and you vote for a person that just based off of the fact that they get you feeling good on the inside and out of popularity and out of the fact that they're a billionaire, you have to remember that you're not the popular one, they are. You're not the billionaire, they are. And they're going to look out for the interests of other billionaires. Because when Reagan went through and he put through his mandate, guess what? He looked out for the rich people and the poor people. There was even a that was created between the poor class and the rich class. And guess what? With this mandate that they're trying to put through, some of that stuff is going to be the same. You will see some successes, just like in Reaganomics. You will see some successes, but then also you're going to see that in the long run, it comes down to your children, your grandchildren, and if any of you live long enough, see some of the effects of it as well. It's not going to it's not going to be good for you. Let's see if we something else here. It says Reagan's tax cuts initially worked to incentivize Americans to participate in the economy. Okay. But Americans used the money that they saved on their taxes to buy consumer goods. Doesn't that sound like when we got stimulus checks? A lot of people use their stimulus checks to not just pay bills, but also to buy consumer goods. Doesn't that sound the same as when we got PPP loans? Look how many people out there got PPP loans and spent it on consumer goods. Some of them have been locked up, some of them have not. However, look at what they have. Look at the large EDD scam that happened. A lot of people got a lot of money. They spent it on consumer goods and services that they had not had. And these people spent it on consumer goods and services in a way that they had not since post-war boom. So did it really help out in the long run? No. Do most people have their EDD and PPP loan money still? No, they don't. But it short little moment, it seems great. But most of these people do not have that any of that money anymore. So what are you doing now? Struggling? Exactly. So that's the whole point. This is where we're headed if we allow this mandate to come into place. Let me see here. I'm gonna look. Let me see the impact of Reaganomics. Let's see what it says. The unemployment rate rose from 7% in 1980 to 11% in 1982. 2 years rose by 4%, then declined to 5% in 1988. Inflation rate declined from 10% and 4% in 1988. When economics have some economics have stated that Reagan's policies were an important part of bringing about the third longest peacetime economic in history. Let's see what Wikipedia has to say about Reaganomics. Just a second, and it'll come. Y'all know my computer's always acting up, so um, yeah, it'll get here soon enough. It's really important that you guys know this information, though. Reaganomics, economics attributed to Paul Harvey, or Reaganism, were the neoliberal economic policies promoted by the U.S. President Ronald Reagan. That's interesting. Conservatives were trying to pass it over as a conservative thing. Interesting. This was during. Now, these policies are characterized by supply side economics, trickle down economics, or stock or voodoo economics by opponents, while Reagan and his advocates preferred to call it free market economics. The pillar policy included increasing defense spending. Did we not read that in the last federal budget, and slowing the growth of government spending? That's why they're wanting to dismantle all of these bureaucracies, because they want to slow government spending. They want to use that money to push it toward military. Again, I am a veteran myself, so trust me, I do. But however, when you taking all your money, you're putting it toward defense spending, you must count on that someone's going to have to sign up to go. And if you don't want to be that person and enough sign up, they're going to put another draft in place, and then you'll be looking like Donald Trump, saying that bone spurs or heel spurs to try to get out of having to go to war to escape the draft. Yeah, you want to leave it up to those of us who actually like volunteered to go instead of having to be forced to go. So again, something for you to think about. Now, this that would reduce. It says balancing the federal budget and slowing the growth of government spending, reducing the federal income tax and capital gains tax, reducing government regulation, and tightening the money supply in order to reduce inflation. The results of Reaganomics are still debated. Supporters point to the end of stagflation, stronger GDP growth, and an entrepreneurial revolution followed. Critics point to the widening income gap, that the rich and the poor, there a wider gap started happening. So when you hear people say like, "Oh, there's no middle class anymore," or "the middle class is gone," this started happening while Ronald Reagan was in office during this whole Reaganomics, and the national debt tripling in 8 years. The national debt tripled in 8 years. So think about it. Say we owed $1 trillion out. By the end of Reagan's term, we owed $3 trillion, because what was being done at the time, it seemed like immediate satisfaction, some microwave type stuff, because it got some stuff right then and there. But in the long run, we ended up owing 3 times more than what we owed when we first started. This is what will happen again if we do this again. We've already studied this. We've already had this happen. So guess what? It's like better you do better, in a sense. We've already had this happen. So if this happens again, guess what? You think you're going to get different results? That's insane. That's literally the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again expecting different results. and that's weird. Okay, so critics point out to the widening income gap. They also described as the atmosphere of greed, reducing economic mobility, and the national debt tripling in 8 years, which ultimately reversed the post World War II trend of a shrinking national debt as percentage of GBD. Now, prior to the Reagan administration, the United States economy experienced a decade of high unemployment and persistently high inflation. Attacks on the Keynesian economic orthodoxy, as well as the empirical economic models, such as the Phillips curve, grew. Political pressure favored stimulus. Hold on, favored stimulus. Keep in mind, resulting in an expansion of the money supply. President Richard Nixon's wage and price controls were phased out. The federal oil reserves, come on, they keep talking about. You hear this when they're going through these, even at the Republican National Convention, they were talking about digging oil, American oil, American oil. The federal oil reserves were created to ease any future shortcom shocks. President Jimmy Carter had begun phasing out price controls on petroleum while he created the Department of Energy, a department that they want to disband. They want to dismantle that Department of Energy that Jimmy Carter put in place. Now, much to the credit for the resolution of the stagflation is given two causes: renewed focus on increasing productivity and a 3-year of the money supply by the Federal Reserve Board under Paul Volcker. The Federal Reserve Board, guess what? They want to dismantle that too. Stating that his intention was to lower taxes, Reagan's approach was a departure from his immediate predecessors. Reagan enacted lower marginal tax rates as well as simplified income tax codes and continued deregulation. Sounding familiar? Didn't we hear about this in some of the promises? We did. During Reagan's 8-year presidency, the annual deficits averaged 4% of GDP, compared to a 2.2% average during the preceding 8 years. The real inflation adjusted average rate of growth in federal spending fell from 4% under Jimmy to 2.5% under Ronald Reagan. GPD per employed person increased at an average 1.5% rate during the Reagan administration, compared to the average 0.6% during the preceding 8 years. Private sector productivity growth, measured as real output per hour of all persons, increased as an average rate of 1.9% during Reagan's 8 years, compared to the 1.3% during the preceding 8 years. Federal net federal net outlay as a percent of GDP averaged 21.4% under Reagan, compared to the 19.1% during the preceding years. Now, during the Nixon and Ford administrations, before Reagan's election, a combined supply and demand side policy was considered unconventional by the moderate wing of the Republican Party. Now, while running against Reagan for the presidential nomination in 1980, George W. Bush, Big Bush, derided Reaganomics as voodoo economics. Similarly, in 1976, Gerald Ford had severely criticized Reagan's proposal to turn back a large part of the federal budget to the states. That not what they're trying to do with this new mandate, to all this federal budget back over. Actually, they're not even trying to turn it to the states. They're really trying to give it all to the president and say, the people that he puts in appointment, because he's trying to get rid of the people. We just read that in this last section. He's trying to get rid of the people who have been in there and are actually well versed on their jobs, and he's trying to put people in there who know nothing about what they're doing, probably so that he can tell them what to do, because he's going to act like he has all the knowledge in the world, even though they have none, which is why he's appointing them, because they're ignorant to the fact. Then they're just going to go with what he says because they don't know any better. Anyways, in his 1980 campaign speech, Reagan presented his economic proposals as a of the free enterprise principles, free market economy that had been a factor before the Great Depression, the FDR's New Deal policies. At the same time, he attracted a following from the supply side economic movement, which opposition to the Keynesian demand stimulus economics. This movement produced some of the strongest supporters for Reagan's policies during his term in office. Now, the contention of the proponents that the tax rate cuts would more than cover any increases in federal debt was influenced by the theory on the elasticity tax rates, known as the Laffer curve. Author Laffer's model predicts that the excessive tax rates actually reduce potential tax revenues by lowering the incentive to produce. The model also predicts that insufficient tax rates below the optimum level of for any given economy, lead directly to the reduction in tax revenues. Ronald Reagan also cited the 14th century Arab scholar Ibn, I think that's Khaldun, as an influence on his supply side economic policies in 1981. Now, Reagan paraphrased Ivan, who said that in the beginning of dynasty, great tax revenues were gained from small assessments, and that at the end of the dynasty, small tax revenues were gained from large assessments. Now, Reagan said his goal is trying to get down to the small assessments and the great revenues. So here are the policies. Okay, it says Reagan lifted remaining domestic petroleum price and allocation controls on January 28, 1981, and lowered the oil windfall profits tax in August 1981. He ended the oil windfall profits tax in 1988. Now, during the year of Reagan's presidency, federal income tax rates were lowered significantly with the signing of the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981, which lowered the top marginal tax bracket from 70% to 50%, the lowest tax bracket from 14% to 11%. Okay, so we caught up here. This act slashes taxes and trim taxes paid by business corporations by 150 billion over a 5-year period. Now, in 1982, Reagan agreed to roll back uh, to a rollback of corporate tax. Hello, that's not most of you Americans, corporate businesses. Corporate dollar rollback to individual income tax cuts. Now, the 1982 tax increase undid a third of the initial tax cut. So he took it down and then took it back up. So in 1983, Reagan instituted a payroll tax increase on Social Security and Medicare hospital insurance. So you started paying more in Social Security, and they started also paying more in Medicare. In 1984, another bill was introduced that closed tax loopholes. According to tax historian Joseph Thorndike, the bills of 1982 and 1984 constituted the biggest tax increase ever enacted during peace time. So it wasn't even a time of war, and taxes increased tremendously. With the Tax Reform Act of 1986, Reagan and Congress sought to simplify the tax system by eliminating many deductions, reducing the highest marginal rates, and reducing the number of tax brackets. In 1983, Democrats Bill Bradley and Dick ooh, Jaffart had offered a proposal. In 1984, Reagan had the Treasury Department produce its own plan. The 1986 Act claimed to be a revenue neutral. While it reduced the top margin, it also cleaned tax base by removing certain tax write-offs, preferences, and exceptions, thus raising the effective tax on activities previously specifically favored by code. Everything he put into place got over. He turned around and did the opposite in layman's term. Federal revenue share of GDP fell from 19.6 in fiscal 1981 to 17.3 in 84, before raising back to 18.4 by fiscal 89. Personal income tax revenues fell during this period relative to GDP, while payroll tax revenues rose relatively to GDP. Reagan's 1981 cut in the top regular tax rate on unearned income reduced the maximum capital gains rate to only 20%, its lowest level since the Hoover administration. That was literally before the Great Depression, not 29 to 33. That was right during that time. Now, the 1986 set tax rates on capital at the same level as the rates on ordinary income like salaries and wages, with both topping out at 28%. Reagan significantly increased public expenditure, primarily the Department of Defense, which rose in constant $2,000 from 267.1 billion in 80, 4.9% of the GPD and 22% of the public expenditure, to 393.1 billion in 88. That's 5.8 of the GDP and 27.3% of public expenditure. Most of these years, military spending was about 6% of GDP. exceeding this number in 4 different years. Now, all these numbers have not been since the end of the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in '73. In '81, Reagan significantly reduced the maximum tax rate, which affected the highest income earners, and lowered the top marginal tax rate from 70% to 50%. In '86, he further reduced the rate to 28%. That is a large jump for people who are making this much money. Okay. The federal deficit under Reagan peaked at 6% of GDP in '83, falling to 3.2 in GDP in '87 and 3.1 of GDP in his final budget. The inflation against adjusted rate of growth in federal spending fell from 4% under Jimmy Carter to 2.5% under Ronald Reagan. This was the slowest rate of growth of inflation adjusted spending since Eisenhower. Now, however, federal deficit as the percent of GDP was up throughout the Reagan presidency from 2.7 at the end of and throughout the Carter administration. As a short run strategy to reduce inflation and lower nominal interest, the U.S. borrowed both domestically and abroad to cover the federal deficits, raising the national debt from 997 billion to 2.85 trillion. This led the U.S. moving from the world's largest international creditor to the world's largest debtor nation. We went into debt, 2.85 trillion worth. Now, Reagan described the new debt as the greatest disappointment of his presidency. I'm not gonna go through it. Let me see. I'm trying to see how much is there left. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot here. All you have to do is type in Reaganomics into Wikipedia, and you can read the rest of it. Guys, I only want to keep you here for a shorter period of time because people tend to have shorter agenda spans than they used to, and so therefore, I tell you what we can do. What we can do is we can do a separate we can do a separate video on this, and we can talk. I would love to hear what you guys have to think about, not just about what we read as far as in the mandate of what we read today, but also what we have read about with Reaganomics so far. I would love to hear what you have to think about that. Again, I tell people all the time, I am one of those people, you do not have to agree with me, but I do want you to understand what's going on. And I get it. A lot of this stuff is like maybe mumbo jumbo to some people, and it maybe needs to be broken down. If anybody is more knowledgeable than those of us that are on this video or me, you're more than welcome. Send me an email or send me a message. I'd love to talk to you about it because it needs to be broken down so that the average person will be able to understand what it is that's going on. Because what we're seeing right now is that they're wanting to make changes, and it may look all glittery and shimmery in the beginning, but as you can see, the long-term effects are crazy. They are crazy. Once again, there's always some projection out here. In this section, I mean, there was some projection there. That 250th anniversary, I told you to put a pin in that. The reason why there's a pin in that, and we're going to do a video on that too, is because of the simple fact that every 250 years, usually a new regime starts. Okay. Usually the regime, the current regime only lasts for about 250 years. So with us coming up on our bicentennial, um, well, not bicentennial, it's called something else. Anyways, with us coming on our 250th year, we're looking at a new regime that's trying to come in, but then you have those who are trying to basically revamp the old regime and keep it going. We have literally 800, like literally 800 military outposts and things across the world. Okay. So what that means is it could possibly put us in a position where, just like we were the major debtors and then we turned around and was the major debtors, it may put us where we're in this regime, we were considered ahead of everybody. This next regime could bring it to where we're not ahead of everybody in the way that we were told. And so it's very important to understand that the 250th anniversary remarks the possibility of a new regime being put in place or an old regime. Now, I will honestly say, to me, the old definitely outdated and it needs to be revamped. Of course, there probably, and I'm sure there are some things that we can take over into the new regime, but there are a lot of things that need to be revamped. Like, legit need to be revamped. And I'm pretty sure that some of you agree, whether you actually like say it or not. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. We will be getting into another video. Like I said, we'll go through Reaganomics a little bit further. We'll continue reading the Wikipedia and we can discuss that. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section. If you are not a subscriber to the channel, make sure you do subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with the videos as they come out. So hit that notification bell that says all. Like and share the video out as well. If you are on Facebook, make sure you're liking, make sure you're sharing, make sure you're or commenting as well, leaving your thoughts and your opinions. Again, you don't have to agree with me. That's personally fine. I get hate comments all the time. They don't bother me. You cannot make me feel any way about myself or about anybody else around me. It really just shows me the type of person that I'm dealing with. And so, yeah, you can hit me with the ignorance if you like to. It's not going to bother me anyways. I've been told some of everything, put on wigs, and they all is an insult to me. You may not be able to see it up under here, but my hair is long enough. But keep it coming. We're gonna keep these videos coming, and so I do hope that you guys have a good day. Also, you subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get the channel bigger and get it out a little bit more. Make sure you go check out the video shorts if you're on YouTube. It's in the court of public opinion, and that's just what we're gonna do. We're gonna leave our opinions out here, and it doesn't matter whether you agree or not, but we're going to have a discussion about it. So, again, thank you so much for tuning into the video, and I'm going to see you guys on the next one.